It's the start of Blue Lock's second selection, and everyone is shuffling around nervously, waiting to see what happens. That is, everyone except one player who walks up to grab 2 balls. First shot, a clean, high trajectory kick. Second shot, a low trajectory curve. And then the 2 balls clash right in the middle in an impossibly perfect pinpoint shot. This simple introduction serves to communicate 2 key aspects about Rin Itoshi, the character who is set to be the main antagonist / rival for the next 100 chapters. One, of course, is that Rin has technical skills that far surpass any of the contestants we've met so far. And secondly, there's no sign that this new player flexed his skills to impress anyone in the vicinity. Rin has set his sights straight for the finish line and beyond. After all, even Blue Lock is only a stepping stone on Rin's quest for vengeance. Flash forward 100 chapters to a scene that serves as a very deliberate parallel to Rin's introduction. It's the start of the Neo Egoist League, and the fledgling Bastard München players compete in an obstacle course with their German teammates. Each stage serves to quantify and rank the player's physical data, with at the very end a target shot that measures one's accuracy. But just as Isagi makes his shot, a figure appears out of nowhere and shoots Isagi's ball out of the air right before it reaches its target. Another impossible pinpoint shot with a visual that's strikingly similar to that of Rin causing the 2 balls to collide. So with this parallel, the manga effectively tells us 2 things. That Rin Kaiser is going to be the new main antagonist, the new Rin, but also that Kaiser differs from Rin in very fundamental ways. Where Rin showed no interest whatsoever in his fellow contestants, Kaiser is characterized by an unhealthy fixation with Isagi from the get-go. Moreover, Rin seems to keep his engagement with the various facets of the Blue Lock program to a minimum, whereas Kaiser's act of sabotage only makes sense within the parameters of Noah's trial. He's obsessed with reigning supreme in the rankings, while also humiliating Isagi by relegating him to the bottom of Bastard's food chain. Hello? My name is Sean, and I guess this roundabout introduction was more of a parabola than a Kaiser impact. So let's get to the point. What I want to discuss in this video is what distinguishes Rin and Kaiser as antagonists through the lens of ego types as introduced in chapter 254, and how this difference between them ties in to Blue Lock's overarching narrative. As a quick and dirty recap, in Blue Lock sports psychology, every player has a unique underlying desire, their hunger in Blue Lock terms. And if they're able to translate this desire into an attainable goal, they can enter the flow state, and from there, achieve their peak performance. During the PXG match, Isagi realizes that he can subdivide the desires of the various people around him into 2 rough categories: self-type and world-type egoists. People with self-style ego types are inherently driven to pursue their arbitrary personal interests, whereas those with world-style ego types are players who are motivated to excel within predefined social structures. It's important to note here as well that neither will inherently make you a better player. However, an athlete can only achieve peak performance if they align their challenges with their inherent desires. Now, if you want a more in-depth look into the concept of ego types and the real-world psychology that underpins it, my mate The Wise has got you covered. I'm just not interested in reinventing the wheel here, so go check out his video instead if you want a deeper delve into this. Anyways, I suspect you've already guessed at my main thesis for this video. Rin is fundamentally a self-style egoist, whereas Kaiser is set up as the archetypical world type. And for both characters, that has been established from their very introduction. Despite being immersed in an environment that completely revolves around hierarchies and rankings, Rin is only interested in his status as Blue Lock's number 1 insofar as it facilitates his, at least from a societal perspective, arbitrary desire to surpass Sai. And on the other hand, Kaiser at the start of the NEL is framed as the natural product to emerge on top in an environment where players are rigorously graded on the basis of quantifiable data. After all, Kaiser's desires are consistently grafted in established rankings and hierarchies. Let me illustrate this by giving you an overview of everything Kaiser strives to achieve throughout the arc. Kaiser came to Japan to achieve one of two purposes. He must either prove that he can stand toe-to-toe with the world's best striker, or get a better offer from a different club, both of which are quintessentially world-type desires, in that either achievement can be objectively valued by the world at large. And similarly, let's look at both instances where Kaiser entered into competition with Isagi. First in his introduction, where he sabotaged the hero of Blue Lock to ensure maximum disparity between them in the BM ranking. And then, after he acknowledges Isagi's abilities at the end of the Manshine match, he proposes that they settle their differences with goals. Again, the nature of Kaiser's wager makes it clear that he's driven to excel through inherently quantifiable metrics. And note that this kind of competition appeals to Isagi, a fellow world type as well, which is something I'll get back to in a moment. So let's turn to Rin's ego type next, because that's really interesting in light of Rin's development over the course of the manga. The Rin we meet at the start of the series is a conflicted character who is yet to grasp the true nature of his ego. In retrospect, one avenue that makes this clear is the dissonance between his initial goal and his true ego type. I discussed this in detail in my recent U20 analysis, but the main reason for this is because Rin is still, in his own way, trying to fulfill Sai's dream. During their childhood, Sai had imposed his dream upon Rin, namely that the two siblings should become the world's best strikers and win the World Cup together. This drive to become the best in Japan, and from there, the best in the world, is what kept him going during Sai's absence. And even after Sai thoroughly rejects Rin for using him as a reason to play football, some traces of the initial dream linger on as Rin keeps talking about becoming the best in the world. The thing is, while the first impression of Rin highlighted his self-type qualities, becoming the best in the world and winning the World Cup are both archetypical world-type interests. Now, that's of course not to say that a self-type can't happen to latch onto the desire to win the World Cup or become the world's best striker. But Blue Lock's self-type egoists are typically driven by more personalized interests. And when viewing Rin from the perspective of ego types, it's telling that his most significant character moment in this series involves him discarding these world-type desires like a shoe that doesn't fit. Rin's awakening as Blue Lock's egotistical destroyer involves him rejecting the influence of others as well as broader external value systems. What Rin comes to realize is that he's been constrained because he sought to define himself in relation to the world around him, rather than listening to his own desires, to his compulsive urges to destroy. This is fundamentally the scene where he comes to understand himself as a self-type egoist. Rin realizes that his personal desires do not neatly correspond to the qualities that are valued by Sai, Blue Lock, or the world at large. And this misunderstanding of his true hunger prevented him from entering a flow state to this point. And realized for someone like Isagi, this would have been completely impossible, that there's a disconnect here, right? Because for him, his desire inherently falls together by what's valued by the world at large. So with all this, it's worth revisiting the start of the PXG match. As I noted before, Isagi responded to Kaisa's challenge after the Manshine match because both of them are world types who highly value achievements like becoming the world's best or scoring the most goals. That's why both of them could really immerse themselves in this challenge. But then, as Isagi is about to face off against Rin in the PXG match, we get a parallel scene to that of Kaisa challenging Isagi. Over the course of the NEL, Isagi has come to understand how to become the best in the world, which includes constantly immersing himself in achievable challenges. And that's what he sets out to do when he challenges Rin to a showdown to become the best in the NEL ranking. Just like how Kaisa had challenged him to a goal showdown previously. And to anticipate potential comments, even if Isagi didn't specifically bring up the NEL bids in chapter 248, it's abundantly clear from the recent bid reveals that he cares deeply about Rin outranking him on this front. But unlike BM's two aces, Rin is not a world type, and so he places little stock in his position in the rankings. All he cares about is his personal desire to thoroughly demolish his rival. And with that, this moment really reflects Rin's character development since the start of the U20 match. After all, Rin himself used to talk about becoming the world's best not too long ago. But his current response to Isagi makes it clear that he's becoming more closely attuned to his actual ego type. Now, it's all well and good that I've managed to label Rin and Kaiser in the butterfly collection of Blue Lock ego types, but there's way more significance attached to the nature of Isagi's main antagonists. So let me close off with some observations about the broader implications of Rin and Kaiser as foils to Isagi within their respective story arcs, and how both antagonists showcase the dangers of leaning too deeply into their respective ego types. Let's start with Rin in the context of the second selection. The main concern of the second selection is showing that you can stand your ground as an individual player. Even after surviving the induction to Blue Lock's philosophy of egoism, the candidates have not yet proven themselves worthy within its impersonal, merit-based system. And so, Rin in many ways serves as a natural extension of this hyper-competitive environment. Blue Lock's number 1 cares very little about his fellow competitors, and him brutally beating down Isagi's team mirrors the merciless eliminations of the second selection more broadly. So in other words, The main antagonist of the arc about proving your individual merits is a player who at this stage is only concerned with his individual perfection. And so, Isagi gradually winning Rin's respect parallels him clawing his way to the finish line. It's no coincidence here that him finally being acknowledged by Rin perfectly coincides with him passing the second selection. This changes significantly with the NEL. In many ways, the Neo Egoist League serves as a liminal moment for the Blue Lock players. It's their transition from high school footballers to the world of professional athletes. And as part of that, we witness a shift from evaluation based on objective criteria, progression by winning matches or scoring the most goals, to a more subjective system based on the whims of wealthy club owners. And as we're seeing with Nagi's and Reo's storyline, optics definitely play a role in their assessment. So with all this, the NEL is a much more world-style environment for two reasons. Firstly, it matters much more how a player relates to the world around them than in the second selection, which is reflected by the increasing attention to team philosophies and politics. And at the same time, the Blue Lock player selection for the new U20 team is now based on their salary ranking, which is, as something that's inherently valued by the world at large, very much a world-style criterion. With all that in mind, it makes sense why Blue Lock introduces an antagonist like Kaiser here, who is fixated on these kinds of status markers. The NEL would be much less compelling if Isagi were to be juxtaposed to someone like Rin, who wouldn't really engage with that aspect of the competition. Given all this, it's really fascinating that the downfall of both Rin and Kaiser seems to be related to them leaning too far into their respective ego types. I discussed this in much greater detail in my U20 analysis, but one of the main concerns throughout this match is the emergence of a hero of Japanese football, a figure who can birth a new era for Japan's football culture. So that brings us to the climax of the match, where Rin sheds all his concerns for the world outside of him. But by doing so, he refuses to take up the mantle of Japan's hero. His hideous rampage serves to kill off any hope for a brighter future. This is basically cast as the biggest pitfall for a self-type egoist. By indulging in only their personal desires, they might threaten the needs of the greater whole. And on the flip side, we get Kaiser's downright unhealthy obsession with taking down Isagi. As world types, both Kaiser and Isagi are deeply concerned with their position in relation to their main rival. Yet, as the NEL progresses, Isagi aims to come out on top by outperforming Kaiser, whereas Kaiser increasingly sabotages Isagi's efforts, to the point that his obsession with his relative position threatens his entire team. What I find really interesting about all this is that, as we've seen in chapter 257, this culminates in a horseshoe theory of sorts. Despite being driven by opposite incentives, Rin and Kaiser display similarly dysfunctional behavior as they devote their attention to crushing Isagi, the two ends of the horseshoe basically converging. And so they express the same frustration when Isagi surpasses both of their efforts. Now, I'm sure this video will become dated soon enough as the PXG match progresses, since all of this to me suggests that Blue Lock is about to delve much deeper into these ideas. But that's something we'll see a bit later, I guess. Either way, if you enjoyed what you saw, consider subscribing for more in-depth Blue Lock analysis every other week. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.